Hi, everybody. I'm here to talk about accounting and the COVID 19 pandemic 2 years on insights, gaps, and an agenda for the future research. So, in the beginning of this article, the authors were researching about the COVID pandemic itself, and they found that 412 million people were confirmed with cases of COVID, and that more than 5.8 million people died globally from COVID. The pandemic also caused a sense of loneliness for Americans as well as others around the globe. Some of the research also focused on mental health of those affected by the pandemic, and they did more research in the areas of accounting, education, public budget, as well as several other sectors. The research method they used was an analytical review scheme, and they talked in this paper about several different areas. But the ones I was going to go over is the accounting education, the public budget response, financial markets, corporate disclosure, and public sector. So this was a graph that they are graph that they had done about the different research themes and the sub themes that they were researching. And as you can tell, they researched quite a few different sectors. So, accounting education. The COVID 19 pandemic caused a mass disruption in the normal way of education. Schools, professors, and students were forced to have studies done via internet platforms rather than in person. There was not a lot of plan in place for this kind of disaster, so a plan had to be created and implemented quickly, as we all know, almost immediately. In the research, they found that the suspension of face-to-face teaching set off operational and emotional turmoil. As we know, there was a lot of people out of the COVID pandemic that already had some emotional ailments, but COVID made them worse. Teachers were forced to have proactive steps towards online assessments. Educators were forced to redesign the course curriculum to facilitate cognitive growth. Students and educators were forced to change their mindset and momentum to digital learning. The transition to hybrid teaching and learning requires more research and in-depth analysis. As we all know, as we go to classes, we know that prior to COVID, there wasn't very much offered in the way of digital learning, online education. There wasn't a whole lot offered. But after the pandemic, as you can tell, there's a lot of opportunity for digital learning. So then the other one was the public budget response. The researchers of this article covered budgetary and fiscal measurements used in the response to the pandemic, the political, economical, and social factors that influence the design of the response. They noted that there were several studies to discuss the extent of the economic impact of the COVID pandemic. Some countries adopted a centralized method a centralized approach, while others adopted a strategic approach. The magnitude of the pandemic was underestimated. The development to crisis management followed a more reactive path and affected the financial, social, political, and stability negatively. They also noted that flexibility in rulemaking, resource mobilization, and administrative execution played an important role in the effectiveness of budgetary response. We all know that, everything from grocery stores to department stores. We know that everybody was hurting during COVID because everything got shut down for a period of time. And if you were not in one of the approved businesses, you were required to shut your door. So yes, it affected the public and the budget quite harsh. Financial markets, due to the COVID pandemic, brought an increase in global financial risk. They noted that countries that suffered a large impact from the COVID pandemic also had a deeper decline in market value. Also noted was the outbreak complicated the corporate environment as well. In the beginning of the pandemic, people resorted to social media outlets to express their feelings. There was also a large loss in the stock market, which caused many stockholders to lose large amounts of money. The level of uncertainty that the COVID pandemic caused has made it difficult for companies and shareholders to invest in the future. They expressed a need to continue research in the finance and accounting sector to create a plan for the future should a pandemic happen again. And as we all saw during COVID, at the beginning of COVID, anybody that owned stock or traded in the stock market, it went down pretty rapidly, and a lot of companies were in the downfall because they were losing money and the outcome for the future was unknown. Alrighty, in the public sector, the authors of the article covered the various approaches government and public services took to understand and respond to the emergencies related to the pandemic. Research was provided insight into the potential of measurements and recording systems to assist public authorities in responding to the COVID pandemic. During the first of the COVID pandemic, accounting played a big role in keeping track of the different types of accounting technologies. The two types are adjudicating and territorializing roles to make visibility. These recording systems helped hospitals with available open beds, materials, and tools throughout all of the states. What beds were specifically for COVID patients and those that were allocated for other emergencies. And we saw that in the news where, they were having to keep track of who was where and what was what. So, we all saw that during the COVID pandemic. So, in conclusion, the researchers of this paper, they stated that there needs to be more research on the future agenda of the emerging and important areas of accounting COVID-19 literature. When they were doing this paper, they did state that there was not a lot of research for them to go off of. They need to focus on research for stability and management accounting. Accounting and accounting scholarships are facing the opportunity to crucially engage with novel and emerging phenomenon at the early stages. More research in the area of governance could be benefited. Another area that might be stimulated by a refocus on COVID-19 crisis would be the risk. And we all know that during the COVID pandemic, there was, we were taking a risk in anything and everything we did. And at the beginning of COVID, you were even taking a risk at leaving your house for the potential of getting sick. Academic investigation could contribute to developing a deeper understanding of how and why accounting became associated with the different areas. The research did not focus on the impact on the organization or society. The focus on the need for quality accounting research to address the several pressing needs posed due to COVID pandemic. So they stated basically we need to have more research. There's not enough research, and should we have another pandemic of some kind, not necessarily COVID, but if there should be another pandemic, we need to have research, and we need to do certain things to make sure that we are ready for another pandemic of whatever kind. They need to make sure that education is ready, um, the budgets, that everything is ready for us to have another pandemic. So I thank you very much. I'm Angela, and I hope you'll have a good day.